Welcome to Learn English Through Chunks. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Astro. Today we are talking about something a lot of people live inside of without fully realizing it: hustle culture. The idea that working harder, longer, and more relentlessly than everyone else is not just a strategy, it is a virtue.
And whether that idea is motivating or quietly destroying people.
We have opinions. They are not the same opinions. Let's get into it.
I want to start with something personal, because I think the only honest way into this conversation is to admit that most of us have been inside hustle culture at some point. We have lived it. Some of us are still living it.
Yes, it's true.
So, when was the first time you actually felt the cost? Not in theory, not something you read about, but the first moment you thought, this is taking a toll on me in a way I cannot keep ignoring.
There was a period, a few years ago, where I was working what I thought was productively. I was pulling long hours. I was building something. I was saying yes to everything. And I remember a specific Sunday afternoon where I sat down to eat lunch and I could not taste the food. Not because anything was wrong with it, but because I was so deep inside my own head, inside the task list, inside the next deadline, that I had completely lost the ability to just be in the moment. I was sitting at a table eating lunch and I was nowhere near that table.
That is a very specific kind of gone.
Yes, and I did not even recognize it as a problem at the time. I thought I was being productive. I thought that was what it felt like to be serious about something.
That is exactly the trap. Because hustle culture does not present itself as damage. It presents itself as discipline.
Right? The language around it is all positive. Dedication, drive, going the extra mile. Nobody says, I am going to work myself into the ground this year. They say, I am going to give everything I have to this.
And both sentences describe the same thing.
Which is the disturbing part. So what about you? When did it cost you something real?
I burned out. Properly, a few years ago. I do not use that word lightly because I think it gets used now for ordinary tiredness. But this was different. I reached a point where I had nothing left. Not creatively, not emotionally, not physically. I was running on empty, and I had been running on empty for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to have anything in the tank. And the worst part was, I had nothing to show for it in the way I thought I would. I had made the sacrifices. I had done the grind. And I looked at my life and thought, where is the payoff?
And was there one?
Some of it, yes, but not in proportion to what it had cost me. And I think that is the thing hustle culture never puts in the small print.
So let's talk about what hustle culture actually is, because I think it's important to be precise about this. It is not just working hard. Hard work has always existed. What hustle culture sells is something more specific. It sells the idea that your worth as a person is directly proportional to your output, that the more you produce, the more valuable you are, that rest is a character flaw.
And I think that idea serves someone. It does not emerge from nowhere.
Who does it serve?
Anyone who benefits from people working more than they should for less than they are worth. And I say that not to be cynical. I say it because I think it is worth asking. Who invented the phrase, sleep when you're dead? Who benefits from a culture where employees feel guilty for leaving work on time? Who benefits from the grind mentality becoming a personal identity rather than a corporate imposition?
That is a fair question, but I want to push back slightly because I think there is a version of hustle culture that is genuinely self-directed, not imposed by an employer. People building their own things, freelancers, entrepreneurs, people who want to be their own boss and are willing to make sacrifices to get there. Is that the same thing?
I think it can be. Even when it is self-imposed, even when nobody is making you do it. The values underneath it are the same. Your value equals your output. Rest is weakness. If you are not moving forward, you are falling behind. Those ideas do not disappear just because you are working for yourself.
That is harder to argue with.
And I think the most insidious version of hustle culture is the self-imposed one. Because at least when an employer is pushing you beyond your limits, you can identify an external source of pressure. When you are doing it to yourself, the critic is inside the building. And you cannot clock out from yourself.
Right? You take it with you everywhere.
Everywhere. On holiday, in the shower, in the middle of a conversation with someone you love. The voice that says, "Should you not be working right now?"
I know that voice extremely well.
Most people who have ever tried to build something know that voice.
There is a specific version of this that I find particularly worth talking about. And that is what happens when you tie your identity to your work, when what you do becomes who you are. This has affected me for a long time.
Oh, has it? I understand. Because at that point, stopping is not just stopping work. Stopping is losing yourself.
Exactly. And I think this is more common than people acknowledge. I have spoken to people, intelligent, successful, driven people, who genuinely could not answer the question, what do you enjoy outside of work? Not because they were hiding something, but because they had slowly, over years, let everything outside of work become secondary. And then one day they looked up and the work was all there was.
And that is fine, until it is not. Until the job ends, or the business fails, or the market changes, or your health gives out. And suddenly the thing your entire sense of self was built on is gone.
And you are left with, who am I now?
Which is an extraordinarily frightening question to be asking in your 40s or 50s.
Or any age.
Or any age. Yes.
I think about this for myself sometimes because I genuinely love what I do. I am not someone who works reluctantly. I push myself because I want to, not because I feel forced to. And I wonder sometimes, is that healthy? Or have I just built a very comfortable cage for myself?
That is such an honest thing to admit.
Well, it is the honest question, isn't it? Because there is a version of I love my work that is genuinely true and genuinely nourishing. And there is a version that is, I have lost myself in this to the point where I cannot separate my happiness from my productivity anymore. And from the outside, those two things can look identical.
They can look identical. And I think the test is, what happens when it is taken away? If you take a week off and you feel genuinely free, that is probably a healthy relationship with your work. If you take a week off and you feel anxious and purposeless and slightly panicked, that is worth paying attention to.
Have you taken that test?
Multiple times, with mixed results.
Same.
Can we talk about the guilt? Because I think it is the part that nobody talks about enough. The specific feeling of lying on a sofa on a Saturday afternoon, doing nothing and feeling wrong. Not tired, not relaxed. Wrong. Like you are doing something that needs to be justified.
Yes. And the terrible thing about that feeling is that it is not irrational. It is perfectly rational given the values that hustle culture installs. If your worth is your output, then producing nothing is literally worthless. The guilt is logical. It is just built on a premise that is destroying you.
Right? The maths of it makes complete sense within the system. The system is the problem.
And I think the people who manage to switch off, genuinely switch off, not just physically stop while mentally still grinding, are the ones who have found some way to update that premise, to believe at a level deep enough to actually feel it, that they have value independent of what they produce.
Which sounds obvious when you say it out loud.
completely obvious and profoundly difficult to actually feel.
Because it requires you to believe something that hustle culture has been telling you is not true since you are old enough to understand ambition.
Yes, the message from very early is get ahead. Keep up, work harder than the person next to you, make something of yourself, all of which implies that your natural, unproduced self is not quite enough yet.
And if you hear that for long enough, if you grow up inside that message, then rest does not feel like recovery. It feels like falling behind.
Even when you know intellectually that rest is what allows you to work well, even when you understand the argument for recovery, the feeling does not update as fast as the knowledge.
The feeling is slower to change than the understanding. Yes, I think that is one of the most honest things about this conversation.
Wow, I felt that.
So, what do you actually do, is the answer. Set boundaries? Because that feels a little neat. A little too simple for something this embedded.
I think boundaries help, but I think they are a symptom treatment. You can set a rule that says you do not check your phone after 8 in the evening, but if you check it at 8:01 and feel relief rather than guilt, the rule is not touching the underlying thing.
Right. The boundary is the fence. But the territory inside the fence still needs to change.
And that is slower work and less satisfying to talk about, because you cannot post, "I updated my fundamental sense of self-worth this quarter" on social media.
Unfortunately not.
Okay, I want to make an argument that I think is slightly unfashionable right now, because the cultural conversation around hustle culture has shifted significantly in the last few years. And I think it has shifted so far in one direction that it has created its own blind spot.
Come on, say it.
I think ambition is good. I think pushing yourself is good. I think there is a real and meaningful difference between burning out because a system is extracting from you against your will, and choosing to work extremely hard on something you believe in and accepting the cost of that. And I think we have started to conflate those two things in a way that is not helpful.
Okay, I hear that. And I think you are right that there is a distinction. But I want to press on the word choosing. Because I think a lot of people who believe they are choosing to grind have been conditioned to make that choice by systems that benefit from it. The choice is real, but it is not made in a vacuum.
That is fair.
And I think the test of whether it is genuine ambition or internalized self-destruction is, do you feel that choice in any given moment? Can you stop and feel okay? Or does stopping feel like a moral failure?
Which brings us back to the guilt.
Which always brings us back to the guilt.
I think my honest position is this. I believe in working hard. I believe that doing difficult things for long periods is how meaningful things get built. I have pushed myself to the limit on things that mattered to me, and I do not regret it. But I have also burned the candle at both ends in ways that cost me things I cannot get back. And I am still working out where the line is.
I think that is probably the most honest thing either of us has said in this conversation.
You sound surprised.
Not surprised. Just relieved that we got there.
Where do you land on it?
I think hustle culture, as it is sold, as an identity, as a virtue, as a badge of honor, is genuinely harmful. I think it takes real damage and reframes it as dedication. And I think a lot of people are paying a price they did not fully agree to.
But
I also think there is something on the other side of the coin that is worth protecting. The drive to build something. The willingness to stay with a hard thing. The knowledge that meaningful work is not always comfortable, and that some periods of intensity are simply part of making something real. I do not want to lose that in the conversation about burnout.
so neither of us is fully anti-hustle.
No, we are anti, pretending it costs nothing. Anti, using it as a measure of your worth. Anti, the guilt of rest and the glorification of exhaustion. but not anti. The desire to build something and give it everything you have.
I can live with that.
I thought you might.
So, where does that leave us practically? Because I think we have had the conversation that most people have in their heads, but do not say out loud. And the ending of that conversation usually involves someone saying something like, "It is about balance," and I find that profoundly unsatisfying.
As well you should. Balance implies a stable midpoint that you find once and maintain. And I do not think that is how it works. I think it is more like you drift in one direction, you notice, you correct. And then you drift again, and you notice again. And the goal is not to stop drifting. The goal is to get better at noticing.
That is actually more useful than balance.
I think so. Because it removes the guilt of getting it wrong. You are not failing when you drift into overwork. You are just not noticing yet.
And the practice is the noticing. Yes. And I think knowing your worth, genuinely knowing it at the level where rest does not feel like a confession, that is probably the work underneath all the other work. That might be the best thing said in this conversation.
Write it down.
I actually will.
You know what this conversation made me want to do?
What?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. For the rest of today.
That sounds exactly right.
And for the first time in a while, I do not feel guilty about it.
That is probably exactly where we leave it. Before we go, we use 25 real English chunks in this conversation. Collocations, phrasal verbs, idioms, the kind of language native speakers use when they talk about work, ambition, exhaustion, and what it costs to build something. We did not stop to explain them. They were just there.
Check the pinned comment to see the full list. And see how many you caught while you were listening.
And tell us in the comments, do you feel guilty when you rest? We want to know. We read everything.
Subscribe for more real conversations like this one.
Stay safe. See you in episode 8.